Have you ever felt that the story of our past, the history we are taught in books, is an incomplete manuscript? That beneath the accepted doctrines and official narratives, there are entire chapters that have been torn out, their truths intentionally obscured. Imagine a form of knowledge so profound, so fundamental to the human experience, that it was once considered a sacred cornerstone of spiritual understanding, only to be systematically erased from our collective memory. This is not the stuff of fiction. We are talking about a teaching that may have been central to the earliest forms of Christianity, a concept that was later deemed a threat and buried under the weight of imperial decrees and theological councils. What if the idea of reincarnation, the enduring belief that our immortal soul journeys through countless lifetimes, was not a foreign concept to the first followers of Christ, but was, in fact, woven into the very fabric of their worldview? What if there are clues, whispers of this lost belief, still echoing within the pages of the Bible itself, waiting for those with open minds to decipher them? Today, we embark on a profound investigation. We will peel back the layers of history, navigate the corridors of ancient civilizations, and scrutinize the pivotal moments that forever altered the course of Western spirituality. Could a truth as universal as reincarnation, one that resonates across the globe in countless cultures, have been deliberately silenced by those in power? Prepare yourself for a journey into a deep historical mystery. Let us begin our quest to uncover what was lost. Was the concept of the soul's return truly excluded from the Judeo-Christian tradition? To even begin to answer this question, we must first travel back in time, long before the first Christian communities gathered. We must visit the ancestral civilizations where the idea of cyclical existence was not a fringe theory, but a foundational pillar of reality. Long before the birth of Jesus of Nazareth, the notion of reincarnation was a vibrant and living current flowing through the grand temples of Egypt, the philosophical schools of Greece, and the esoteric rites of initiates across the ancient world. Let us first turn our gaze to the sun-scorched lands of the Nile, where the great pyramids stand as silent sentinels to the passage of millennia. Here, the Egyptian priesthood guarded the intricate mysteries of the soul's journey after death. For them, mortality was merely a transition, a temporary doorway between different states of being. The sacred collection of texts we know as the Book of the Dead is not merely a book of spells. It is a detailed roadmap for the soul, or the Ba, as it navigates the afterlife. It describes a journey of trials and a final judgment before the god Osiris. A soul deemed worthy could ascend to the celestial realms, but the texts also allude to the possibility of return, of being reborn to continue its cosmic pilgrimage. The soul was viewed, in its very essence, as an eternal traveler, destined to return as many times as was necessary to achieve a state of perfect balance and harmony with the divine order, or Ma'at. Now, let us journey across continents to the spiritual heartland of the Indus Valley, along the sacred banks of the Ganges River. Here, another, even more detailed vision of reincarnation blossomed into a sophisticated philosophical system. Within the ancient Vedic texts of India, some of which date back to 1500 BCE, we find the fully formed concept of samsara. This is the great, unending cosmic wheel of birth, death, and rebirth. According to the foundational Hindu scriptures, this cycle is governed by an immutable law, the law of karma. Every action, every thought, every intention from one life inexorably shapes the circumstances of the next. It is a profound system of cosmic justice and personal responsibility. This journey of learning, this cycle of existences, continues relentlessly until the soul, or Atman, finally frees itself from all worldly attachments and achieves moksha, the ultimate liberation from the wheel of becoming and its reunion with the ultimate reality, Brahman. The principle is elegantly simple yet cosmically profound. You are the architect of your own destiny, across countless lifetimes. But perhaps one of the most intellectually rigorous approaches to reincarnation in the ancient world emerged from the brilliant minds of ancient Greece. Pythagoras, the legendary philosopher and master of mathematics, taught his inner circle of disciples that the human soul was an immortal spark of the divine, temporarily encased in a physical body. He believed it was reborn successively in different forms, not as a punishment, but as a crucial part of its education. For Pythagoras, the universe itself was a manifestation of divine harmony and mathematical order, and reincarnation was the mechanism by which the soul could gradually ascend through this cosmic order, purifying itself with each life until it achieved a state of perfection and could finally return to its divine source. In his own philosophy, the soul would continue to enter new bodies, learning new lessons until it was entirely purified of its earthly passions. This powerful idea was shared and expanded upon by another titan of Greek thought, Plato. In his deeply moving dialogue, Phaedo, Plato gives a detailed account of Socrates' final hours, during which the great philosopher calmly and rationally argues for the immortality and transmigration of the soul. For Plato, the soul's journey was an epic of spiritual evolution spanning multiple lives. He proposed that pure souls, those who had dedicated their lives to wisdom and virtue, would ascend to higher, more sublime realms of existence. Conversely, those souls still weighed down by material desires and in need of further learning would inevitably be drawn back to the earthly plane to continue their education. In all of these grand traditions, Egyptian, Indian, and Greek reincarnation was perceived as more than just a spiritual belief. It was understood as an essential mechanism for the soul's refinement. Each lifetime was a unique classroom, a fresh opportunity for moral development and spiritual expansion. Each incarnation was like turning a new page in the great cosmic book of one's own personal evolution. Seeing this vast historical backdrop, an unavoidable question begins to form. If so many of the world's most influential ancient cultures embraced reincarnation as a fundamental truth of existence, how did Christianity, at least in the form we know it today, come to so vehemently reject it? Or, more tantalizingly, did it in fact once accept it, only to later suppress it? In the first few centuries following the death of Christ, the Christian faith was not the monolithic, uniformly organized religion it would later become. There was no single, universally accepted Bible. There was no central papal authority dictating infallible doctrine. Instead, there was a vibrant and at times chaotic tapestry of communities, each with its own unique interpretation of Jesus' teachings. It was a period of intense spiritual seeking, a time of exploration and experimentation, where the quest for universal truths often transcended the narrow confines of a single earthly life. The early Christian worldview was, in many ways, far more fluid and mystical than the rigid doctrines that would eventually solidify into orthodoxy. The human soul was widely seen as an eternal entity, not something created anew at the moment of conception, confined to a single physical body. The spiritual focus was not solely on the present life as the one and only chance for salvation, but on the soul's epic and ongoing journey through the vastness of time. This perspective naturally led many early Christians, particularly those influenced by the philosophical currents of the day, to consider the very real possibility that after death, the soul would return to the physical world in a new form, as part of a continuous, divine process of purification and evolution. Among the most brilliant and influential Christian minds of this formative period, one figure stands out as a clear proponent of this idea: Origen of Alexandria. Origen was more than just a theologian. He was a towering intellectual, a mystical philosopher, whose thought was deeply steeped in the rich, esoteric and philosophical traditions of Egypt, Greece, and the Near East. He helmed the catechetical school of Alexandria, the most respected center of learning in the Christian world. Origen argued passionately that the soul was not a fleeting creation of God, but possessed an eternal, pre-existent origin, and that it progressed through numerous cycles of life and death. In his masterwork, De Principiis, or On the Principles, one of the first systematic works of Christian theology ever written, Origen explicitly lays out his doctrine of the pre-existence of souls and their subsequent incarnations. He posited that the human soul, after departing the physical body, would eventually return to Earth in a new incarnation, and would continue to do so until it had achieved complete purification and was ready for reunion with God. For Origen, reincarnation was the very engine of spiritual evolution. Through the crucible of many lifetimes, the soul would slowly cleanse itself of impurities, refine its nature, and ascend towards divine unity. This concept, so similar to the Eastern understanding, was, in Origen's view, a magnificent expression of God's love and justice. He did not see reincarnation as a punishment, but as a divine opportunity for continuous learning and growth. He believed that the full spectrum of life experiences, the joys and the sorrows, were necessary for the soul's perfection. It was through these experiences that the soul would draw ever closer to eternal wisdom. In a powerful passage, he stated that each soul comes into this world strengthened by the victories or weakened by the defeats of its previous life. This idea, that our choices and failings in one life could directly influence the conditions of our future existences, aligns perfectly with the philosophy of cosmic justice that permeated so many ancient spiritual traditions. For Origen, reincarnation was not some foreign pagan concept grafted onto Christianity. On the contrary, he believed it was in perfect harmony with the core message of redemption and purification that Christ himself had taught. After all, who could better understand the nature of eternity than a soul that had already journeyed through multiple cycles of existence? For several centuries, Christian thought continued to be shaped by a diverse integration of spiritual and philosophical ideas that echoed these ancient traditions. The topic of the soul's return was a subject of open discussion and debate within many early Christian circles, and while not universally accepted, it was far from being considered heretical. However, by the 6th century, a dramatic and decisive event occurred that would alter the faith forever. The Second Council of Constantinople, a powerful ecclesiastical gathering convened with the full backing of imperial authority, would determine the ultimate fate of this doctrine, marking a definitive and tragic turning point. The decision to formally condemn and ban the doctrine of reincarnation from official Christian teachings was not a purely theological one. It was, at its core, a political act. The Roman Emperor Justinian and his formidable wife, Empress Theodora, spearheaded a concerted effort to eliminate the idea of multiple lives. With it, they also eliminated the empowering perspective of a continuous, self-directed spiritual evolution that transcended the confines of a single lifetime and the authority of a single institution. Emperor Justinian was a ruler obsessed with unity and control. For him, consolidating the Christian faith under a single, rigid set of doctrines was not just a matter of religious piety. It was essential for maintaining order and stability throughout his vast and often fractious empire. The doctrine of reincarnation, with its profound implications of multiple chances and the soul's innate capacity for self-purification, posed a direct philosophical challenge to the growing temporal power and central authority of the Church. The Church was positioning itself as the sole mediator of salvation, the exclusive gatekeeper to the kingdom of God. If the soul could achieve its own salvation over many lifetimes, the institution's power was fundamentally diminished. With his politically astute and famously resolute wife Theodora at his side, Justinian convened the Second Council of Constantinople in the year 553 AD. This council would become a historical landmark, a watershed moment in the history of Western thought. Backed by ecclesiastical leaders who were closely allied with imperial power, Justinian effectively wielded the council as a tool to forge a uniform, state-sanctioned doctrine. The council gathered bishops and theologians primarily from the Christian East, with some representatives from the West. Key figures included Patriarch Eutychius of Constantinople, who presided, and Pope Vigilius of Rome, who initially resisted Justinian's decrees, but was eventually strong-armed into compliance under immense imperial pressure. The eradication of reincarnation from Christianity was ultimately a matter of power. Reincarnation presented a dangerously empowering idea. It implied that each soul was the ultimate master of its own spiritual evolution, and that through the accumulated experiences of multiple lives, it could achieve the purity necessary to unite with the divine. This perspective could liberate people from their dependency on a single, mediating institution for their salvation. Controlling the destiny of the soul was one of the most effective tools for ensuring the Church's authority over its believers. If people were taught that they had only one life to secure their eternal salvation or face eternal damnation, the urgency to follow the Church's teachings, participate in its rituals, and obey its clergy increased exponentially. Reincarnation, in contrast, offered a more patient, compassionate, and self-reliant path to the divine. Justinian understood that a unified Church under a single, state-approved doctrine would be a powerful instrument for strengthening his empire. By surgically removing reincarnation from Christian theology, he reinforced the urgent need to seek immediate salvation without compromise, and always through strict obedience to the clergy and their official teachings. It is also recorded that Empress Theodora had a deeply personal motivation for this purge. Before her rise to power, Theodora's early life was marked by poverty and the severe social stigma of her past as an actress, a profession equated at the time with prostitution. This history is said to have instilled in her a profound terror of karmic retribution, a fear of being reborn into a new life filled with similar hardships. This personal dread, combined with Justinian's political ambition to unify his empire and centralize power within the church, created the perfect storm to extinguish this ancient belief. Justinian issued a series of edicts, known as the anathemas against Origen, which explicitly declared the doctrine of the pre-existence of souls and their subsequent reincarnation to be heretical. The political pressure was so immense that even the most resistant theological voices were eventually silenced, accepting the imperial decree out of either convenience or fear. In the end, the brilliant Origen was posthumously declared a heretic, nearly 3 centuries after his death, and his profound ideas on the soul's journey were deemed incompatible with official Christian doctrine. Any who dared to perpetuate his teachings were threatened with excommunication and persecution. The condemnation was sealed, and a door was closed on a significant chapter of Christian thought. For countless believers, the Bible is the final, unchanging Word of God. But could its very pages contain subtle hints of a truth that has been intentionally obscured for centuries? What if the concept of reincarnation was indeed an essential teaching of early Christianity, one that was later methodically edited out or reinterpreted by church authorities? Within its verses, there are several enigmatic passages that seem to suggest the possibility of the soul's return, passages that have since been explained away or set aside to conform to the established dogma. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 17, we find one of the most frequently cited examples. After the extraordinary event of the Transfiguration, the disciples asked Jesus about the ancient prophecy that the prophet Elijah must return before the coming of the Messiah. Jesus gives a cryptic but powerful reply, stating that Elijah has in fact already come, but that they did not recognize him. He was referring to John the Baptist. This mysterious declaration strongly suggests that John the Baptist was the reincarnation of the spirit and power of Elijah, returning to prepare the way for the Christ, just as the prophecy foretold. For the early Christians listening to this, the meaning would have likely been clear, as reincarnation was a familiar part of the era's spiritual landscape. Jesus does not hesitate to affirm that the prophetic spirit of Elijah had returned in the form of John, as if this were an accepted and understood reality among his followers. Another deeply intriguing passage appears in the Gospel of John, chapter 9. Upon encountering a man who was born blind, the disciples asked Jesus a very specific and telling question. "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" This question is philosophically loaded. It inherently presupposes the possibility that the man himself could have sinned before he was born, which is only logical within a framework that includes past lives. If the concept of reincarnation were entirely foreign to their worldview, the question would be nonsensical. The disciples appear to be working from an understanding that the soul might carry a history of actions from beyond its current life. Jesus' response is equally profound. He does not correct or dismiss their underlying assumption. Instead, he elevates the conversation, explaining that the man's condition is not the result of past sin, but is an opportunity for the works of God to be made manifest. The dialogue implicitly accepts a premise where souls carry experiences from one state of being to another. And in John, chapter 3, Jesus has his famous nocturnal conversation with Nicodemus, a learned Pharisee. Jesus tells him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God." A confused Nicodemus takes this literally, asking how a grown man can re-enter his mother's womb. Jesus clarifies that he is speaking of a spiritual birth. However, this phrase, born again, from the Greek word anothen, can also be translated as born from above. Some scholars argue that this could be a veiled, multi-layered reference to a cycle of successive lives, a process of rebirth that facilitates learning and purification. Nicodemus, as a religious scholar, would have understood Jesus was speaking of a profound mystery. The purely metaphorical interpretation does not fully capture the depth of Jesus' message. which clearly states that this new birth is the key to spiritual evolution, a concept that aligns seamlessly with the idea of being reborn across multiple lifetimes to achieve spiritual maturity. The doctrine of reincarnation, though suppressed for centuries in the West, is now resurging with incredible force in modern spirituality. It offers a compelling framework for finding meaning, purpose, and a deeper understanding of our own existence. In our increasingly fast-paced world, where the pressure for immediate results often overshadows the slow, patient process of inner growth, the idea of multiple lives emerges as a powerful antidote. It presents a pathway of continuous learning and soul evolution. For modern spirituality, reincarnation is not merely a theory about what happens after we die. It is a lens through which to understand the entire human experience. It suggests that each life is a precious and unique opportunity for growth, a sacred chance for purification and learning that brings us ever closer to our true, divine self. Instead of the stark dichotomy of seeking salvation in a single, high-stakes lifetime, as taught by official dogma, reincarnation offers a more compassionate, patient, and empowering view of the soul's development, a stark contrast to the concepts of eternal damnation or eternal, static rest. This ancient notion was reintroduced to the Western world primarily through its renewed contact with Eastern thought, particularly Hinduism and Buddhism, where reincarnation remains a central tenet. Visionary philosophers like Alan Watts, beloved spiritual leaders like the Dalai Lama, and influential gurus like Swami Vivekananda were instrumental in popularizing this belief in the West. They emphasized that the cycle of birth and rebirth is not a deterministic trap, but a liberating process of expanding self-awareness. According to these traditions, our actions, our karma, not only shape our current reality but also set the stage for our future lives, fostering a profound understanding of personal responsibility and the deep interconnectedness of all beings. Over time, this perspective has found incredibly fertile ground in the Western mind. Concepts like rebirth and karma, once considered exotic, are now foundational pillars for spiritual reflection for millions, bringing with them a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper understanding of life and the soul. Beyond the realms of philosophy and religion, the idea of reincarnation has also gained intriguing support from the field of modern psychology. Researchers like Dr. Ian Stevenson, a respected psychiatrist and professor at the University of Virginia School of Medicine, devoted decades of his life to the meticulous, scientific study of cases of young children who reported detailed and specific memories of what appeared to be past lives. His rigorous, cross-cultural studies documented thousands of cases where children, often between the ages of 2 and 5, described facts about deceased individuals they could not have possibly known. They recalled names, places, and events with stunning accuracy, details which were later independently verified. Furthermore, the practice of past life regression therapy, popularized by respected therapists like Dr. Brian Weiss, suggests that exploring experiences from previous incarnations can help individuals resolve deep-seated traumas, phobias, and emotional blockages that seem to have no discernible origin in their current life. Rather than viewing reincarnation as a mere philosophical concept, the field of transpersonal psychology explores the very real possibility that we carry the imprints of past life experiences within us, and that these memories, whether conscious or unconscious, continue to impact our present psyche in profound ways. Reincarnation remains one of the great existential questions of our time. It is a mystery that provokes us, inspires us, and simultaneously challenges our most deeply held beliefs about life, death, and the nature of the self. For some, the idea of multiple lives is a master key, unlocking the doors to a deeper spiritual understanding and a vision of continuous growth. It suggests that the soul, like an eternal pilgrim, is forever on a sacred quest for its own truth. For others, it is a belief that simply does not align with their perception of what it means to be human, a concept that feels distant from the traditions that have shaped Western culture. Regardless of one's personal stance, the question of reincarnation is not ultimately a doctrine to be accepted or rejected blindly. It is an invitation. It is an invitation for each and every one of us to look within ourselves, to question, to explore, and to find the answers that illuminate our own unique path and bring us a sense of inner peace. In the final analysis, whether our essence is part of an eternal cycle of rebirths or a single, unique breath upon this earth, what truly matters is not the final destination, but the quality of our journey here and now. What counts is whether we are living our days with purpose, with compassion, with a sense of profound responsibility, and with a heart that is overflowing with love. What are your thoughts on this hidden history? Do you believe reincarnation was once a part of early Christianity? Share your perspective in the comments below. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the mysteries of the past.